Hey guys, in today's video, I want to go over formik. So formik is a React package to deal with forms, as the name might suggest. So in web development, we constantly have to deal with forms, whether it's something like a register form, logins, just generally capturing user data. It's most of the time it's captured through a form. Now, what formik does is it allows us to deal with things like form validation in a much easier way. It lets us standardize our way of handling forms and, let's say, our form structures. It's good for pretty much every use case. There might be some edge cases to this where you're going to have to come up with your own custom solution if you're really, doing something odd. But I'd say for about 90% of use cases, this is really, really good and will probably be exactly what you need. And one of the really nice things about formik is that you can create your own custom, let's say, custom components for, let's say, an input. And then you can reuse that everywhere. And you don't have to worry about things like your state for that form's value, errors or things like that. Formik can actually take care of that for you. So you put in effort at the start to create some of your own custom components. And then after that, you just reuse them everywhere. And it's very, very straightforward and easy to use. Handles things like errors for us and it's really nice. We're also going to be using yup. So this is just for validating the values that our form has. So say we have a login page where we have an email that's required, then it has to be an email, so a valid email. The formik can take care of things like that to make sure that it's like a string. I think there's a really good example here. So here you can see there's one for email, it's a string and it's email. So we could also do other things like required. So this is positive integer. There's all sorts of things. You can even do things for arrays. So you don't have to worry about, let's say you have a dynamic number of fields. This also covers that. So it's really good. And the reason why I'm actually showing yup is because formik integrates with yup very, very smoothly. It's actually it's actually integrated into formik. So you can very easily use yup with formik. Okay, so to get started, let's create our basic React template. So what you want to do is type npx, so this is in your terminal, create React app, and then specify whatever directory you want. So // would just be the current directory. I've already run this, so I have some of the files here. Let's also install our dependencies, so it will be npm i. So we want formik, and we also want yup. So I've already installed these as well. This will just take a couple minutes. Once that's done, you guys can come back to this video. So let's next just start up our development server. So npm run start. This will just start up your localhost server. Okay, so we have our localhost server running. Let's go into the app.js. So I'm going to close this. I'm just going to remove all of this. Yep, so it's empty now. Let's start off by just explaining what I'm going to do. So I'm just going to create a very simple form to get started with. That's just going to have an email and a password. So let's start off by importing formik from formik. So to get started, let's call our formik component. Let's see exactly what this does. So this has two required props that we have to give to it. The first one is the initial values. So there's going to be an object. And the second one is the onSubmit. So onSubmit, we get data. And we also get some other helpers, I think. But just for now, I'm going to ignore those helpers. And I'm just going to console log data. Let me just multi-line this. Okay, so our initial values, I'm just going to say we have an email field. So I'm just going to assume that we're going to have an email value, which is initially going to be empty, and a password, which is initially also going to be empty. So now we don't just start putting our inputs here. What we actually do is we have to put a function, and that's because formik's going to call this function. And by doing that, what it allows us to do is actually get some props from formik. So here's what I mean by that. So we actually get some props here. If I console log these props, so you can see we're passing a function here. We're not calling this function, but formik will call it for us. And because it's calling it for us, it can actually pass some props to us. So let's take a look at what these props are. Let's open up the terminal, the console. And you can see we get a bunch of props. And you don't need all of these, so I know this seems overwhelming. I'll go through some of the key ones. So just to point them out now, we have the handle blur, handle change, errors. We have is submitting. So this is if you had so here on the on submit, if this is async, let's say you make an API request, you want to maybe instead show a loader while it's submitting. You can use this. We have some other fields. These are some helpers that are quite useful as well. Touched, so we can see which fields have been touched. So that way, maybe we can choose to show error messages only on those fields. I know this is very confusing to get started with, but hopefully this will be real clear to you guys by the end of this video. Okay, so what I'm actually going to do is just destructure the props instead of call them directly here. This is just so it's a bit easier for me. Let's return a form where on submit, what I actually want to do is do handle submit. So one of the props that it gives us is a handle submit. And what this does is it takes care of things like preventing the window from reloading every time you submit a form. So that's quite nice, and it takes care of some other stuff as well, which we don't really have to deal with. Let's next create a input. So let's create a div to wrap this. So let's call it input wrapper. Let's have a label, and it's going to be email. And let's have a input. So there's going to be text. We're going to now add some stuff to this input, which might seem a bit confusing, but I'll explain it to you guys. So the first thing I'm going to add to an input is the onChange. Now, normally you might have some state, and that state would be your form's data. And in this case, we don't actually have to do that. Instead, we get a handle change from formik, which we can pass down here. So handle change. And what this is going to do is going to use a name. So let's give it a name. So it's email. Against this name, it's going to put into data. It's going to put into data the value. So let's say we perform a keystroke, we press a letter. Then it's actually going to, in its own internal state, it's going to update the value associated to this name. So the names are quite important in this, and names are actually important in every form. So just remember that. It's going to use the name field, and this is what you're going to get the data from. So if we were to change this to, let's say, test@email.com, then data.email would actually be that value that we just said, test@email.com. Let's also do a on blur, which is going to be handle blur, which is also given to us by formik. So handle blur. And I think that should be it for this. Hope I'm not missing anything. So we have a name. Let's also give it a placeholder. So email. And let's just check out our page. So we can see we have the email and the field. Let me just put some spacing at the top. So actually let's keep everything. Remove that. Let's just say .input wrapper margin top. Just give it a 30 pixels. Okay, so now we have this. Let's just put a button here. So let's say button type submit, and let's just say submit. Now let's look out for this console log here of data and see exactly what we get. So I'm just going to say, well, I'm just going to actually do nothing now. Just click submit, and we get email and password. Let's next say test@test.com. And when I submit this one, we get test@test.com. If I was to, let's say, change this name to email to test@test.com, hit submit, then it would actually be on the email to. So you can see we set our initial values to only have email and password, but our final data actually has the email to as well, so it will append to it. I just realized we should also do value is equal to, we get values here, and so we're going to do values.email. So you can think of values almost the same as data, and so there, well, before it refreshed, you can see that values, that data.email was actually the email that we changed, and this is the same. I hope that makes sense. So if I do it one more time, if I just console log values, so if I do test. Oh, I just realized this is, I forgot to change the name of this one. So if I now do test, you can see here on every keystroke, it's updating the values to be the value of that name of that input field. Okay, so far with very minimal amounts of code, you can see we already have a way of not having to deal with our handle submit, so that's taken care of for us. Handle change taken care of for us. Our state is also taken care of for us. We have things like the handle blur. So another thing we could do is when we deal with error messages, we're going to also not always show the error message. Maybe we're only going to show the error message for touched fields. So I'll show you guys what I mean by that. But yeah, let's just create one more of these. This is going to be our password. I just realized this should be email. It's going to be password. And let's do, that's going to be values.password. These two still just stay the same. So our handle change and handle blur, you use the name to determine which field to update in its own internal state. The placeholder, we're just going to say password. So now if I type some stuff in, you can see it shows up here in the password. All right, so that's really nice. We have our state handled for us. Fast click submit. Then you can see we have all of the data here, right, in our console log. So that's already taken care of a lot of the issues a lot of the things you might have to normally manually do. Formik takes care of it for us. So now I actually want to go into error validation. So let's import everything as yup from yup. To get started with yup, what I'm going to do is just create a basic schema, which is going to define how our data should look. So which fields are required, maybe some requirements for the password, like a minimum length. So we're going to be doing that with yup. So to get started, let's just create a constant here. I'm going to call it form schema. It's going to be equal to yup.object, and it's going to have a shape. So here we define the shape of this object. And let's say it's going to have an email, and this is going to be a yup.email. It's also going to be required, and let's say string as well. Now let's also add in a password. So it's going to be yup.string. I'm going to say required as well. So now we have this form schema. What we can actually do is just directly put that into Formik. So this is one of the really nice things about Formik, is that it actually it knows about yup and it can work with it. So we can do validation schema. It's just going to be what we called it here, so form schema. So now I want to just console log errors. So we have errors here, which is passed to us by Formik. And I'm just going to console log it. Oh, and I just realized this is a capital Y. Let me just change it here. So yeah. Oh, and I just realized I think this has to be, let's do yup.string. And then we can do email here. Okay, so let's say I click on this, I click off it. Right, then what it's going to do, so this is our errors. You can see in errors, we have email is a required field. So the reason that this error message is showing is because it is a string. It's an empty string, so it's not going to throw an error. But it's required, and currently it's empty. So we get this error message here, email is a required field. We can actually change this error message. So let's say changed message, email field is required. So this is just an example. So if I click on this, click off it, then you can see here, so changed message, email field is required. So our actual the error message itself, you can change it to whatever you want for each specific time, for each specific case. So let's say you want one message here, you can have a different message here. So next, let's do test at test.com, and let's actually make it invalid. So you can see email must be a valid email. So I'm assuming that Yup does some sort of regex validation test against this, because if I do .com, I scroll to the bottom, you can see that email field that email property that we have here is no longer on the object, but the password one is still there. So on password, we just have required. So if I do test, you can see it's gone. That it's fulfilled the requirements and it's gone. We can do a .min, so say minimum of 6 characters. Let's do test. So you can see here that password is must be at least 6 characters. And if I make it longer than 6 characters, you can see that error message goes away. So this is really nice, and it plugs straight into formik. So how do we actually go about showing these error messages? So I'm gonna also import also a destructure touched. The reason I'm doing this is because what I want to do is say errors dot, and then so this is the email. Oops. So this is the email field. So if we have errors.email and touched.email, so I should probably just show you guys what touched is. It's very similar to errors. Let's just look at this. So currently touched is completely empty. If I click email, click off it, email is now true. I click password, I click off it, password is now true. So just seeing which fields have been clicked on. So if we have errors in the email field and the email field was touched, then what I actually want to do is show a paragraph tag with just give it a class name of error, and I just want to render errors.email. So now if I click this and I click off of it, email is a required field, but you can see, so if I console log errors again, so if I click on this, click off of it, we have an error for password as well, but it's not showing anything for password yet. And that actually probably is because we haven't added this, so let me add it. So let's say password, password, and password. So now if we try this again, when I click on email, you can see that password has this error, but it's not showing here because password isn't currently touched. So now if we click on it, click off it, now it shows the error message for password. And one more thing, if I just refresh this, if I click submit straight away, it shows both error messages. So when you submit, it will trigger it as though they are touched fields. So you don't have to worry about that. So yeah, that's quite nice. But one thing you might notice straight away is this isn't the most pleasing to look at. So what I mean by that is we have this handle change, we have this handle this on blur with a handle blur, and there's a lot of things that really this, for example, this error message could be put into one place, right? So what I want to do is just create a new component. So let's call this text input. Let's import React. Let's say text input. And we are expecting some props from this. And all I'm going to return, so I'm just going to copy this. So you see this input wrapper, this entire div. I'm just going to copy that and just put it in here. And let's just export defaults, our text input. So I want to use this and just make it a bit simpler. So instead of having to put this entire div, I just want to pass down a couple of props to it. Now, having to put the handle change, the handle blur, passing these down can be a bit annoying. So instead, what I'm going to do is this. So I'm going to remove all of these. I'm going to remove this as well. The label, let's just do a conditional statement. So props.label So if we have a label, in case we don't want a label, we can just put this in, so props dot label. The errors, I'm going to show you guys how we deal with this. So one of the nice things about Formik, if I go to their documentation, is they actually let us use hooks. So I think it's use field. Yeah, so use field. So this is very similar to what we're going to be creating. Use field, this hook right here, actually can connect to whatever Formik, whatever wrapper Formik component it's in. It does this via the context API. So I'm not going to bore you guys with that. But all I want to really show you guys with this is we don't actually have to pass down any of these to the component. So what we're just going to do is we're going to say, let's see, what do we get? We get field, meta, and helpers. So field, we just put it directly on our input. So this is going to handle all of those things we were doing before. So it's going to handle the value, the onChange, the onBlur, and some other stuff. Props here, this is just mainly for us to add in whatever we want to add in. And this is just going to be for handling our error messages. So let's do this now. So we get field, meta, and helpers. I'm actually going to ignore helpers. These are just functions to do things like set the value of this yourself. So there are some cases where, let's say you're using React Select, you might want to use that to create your own wrapper component to use React Select with Formik. I'm not going to get into that in this video. Something that I've done. If you guys are interested in that, I can make a video about it, how to use React Select with Formik. Let's just say use field, and this just expects a name. So props.name. This name does have to be unique per Formik, let's say, instance. So just remember that. Let's now remove this. Let's do field, spread in all of the props, and let's also spread in whatever props we want as well. Let's next, this is going to be for props.name. And let's do errors. So errors is actually going to be inside meta. So meta.errors.email. I think it's actually just metas.error, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, so meta.error, meta.touched, and then we can just do error, meta.error. So now let's actually try this out. So let's remove this email one, remove the entire thing. Let's call our text input. So you can see it's a lot smaller already. I'm just going to pass in the name of email. And I think that should be it. I don't think there's anything else special that we need. Maybe just also adding a placeholder. Email. And yeah, so let's see how this works. So just to make sure that this is different, just put 4 dots. So yeah, this is different. You can see straight away when I clicked off it, we get the error message. So that's nice. So we can already tell that at least the error message part is working. Let's remove this and let's see if in the data we actually get the value of this input. So let's see if that happens. So let's do test, and let's do test here. You can see we don't have a label because I didn't add one in, so we'll add that in a moment. And let's click submit. So you can see we are indeed getting the value of this email, and this looks a lot cleaner than all of this, because we put in the hard work to make this once. And it's not even really hard work, it's really simple, but we can reuse it anywhere. So let's also do the same thing with this one. So let's do text input, name password, placeholder password. Let's also give this a label now. Let's just say email, and let's do label for this, password. So now you can see these are also being added in, which is nice. When we click submit, shows the error messages. We can do some styling for the error messages, so make them red. You could, let's say, do something like put a star here, just to really make it stand out. But yeah, this is the very basics of formik. Now I want to get into one more thing before I close out this video. It's a bit confusing, but I think it's something you might want to know how to do. So sometimes we want to actually have an array of data. So let's say, this is just an example. Let's say we have data where we have something like users. So let's say it's an array. And we want to be able to dynamically add users. So let's say each user has a name. And then let's say we want to add a new one. Let's also give it, say, an ID. Actually, I don't think we need that. So we want to add another user, name 2. And we want to be able to edit these dynamically. So how would we do that with formik? Formik actually makes it pretty easy for us to do that. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to remove a lot of this. So let's just remove this. Let's create one called users. We'll get into the validation in a moment. Actually, I'll leave that empty. Let's say users, which is by default an empty array. Oh, by the way, you could also see that because here, so this is just a side note, because here we're using the use field hook, we don't actually need any of this. We can just keep the handle submit for the form, but even the form, I think there's a use formik hook, which you can also use. So even this you probably won't even need. Okay, so just for the final part of this video, we're gonna go through how to deal with users and multiple fields, primarily dynamic fields. So we're gonna use something called field array. So field array is similar to formik in that it's a render prop. So we're just gonna do field array. The name is gonna be users. So I think this is the name of our value here. So this is a render prop. So we get some props here. I'm actually just going to destructure a couple props. So we have push and remove. So these are two important ones. Then I'm going to return just a div for now. Now, one thing I'm going to get back from here is actually the values, because I want to map over our users. So let's do values dot users dot map. Let's say user, actually let's say user and index. And for each one, I'm just going to return. So let me just do this inline. So I'm just going to return a text input. And this is going to have a name. So the name's actually quite important. So I'm going to use backticks here. It's going to be users dot, and then the index dot, and then the name. So this is, let's say each user is just going to have one field, which is its name. Let's also add in a label. So I'm just going to say users. Oh, actually just user, let's say name. And I'm just going to put in the index as well, just so we have a visual representation of which index it is, although it will be quite clear. So we have the user and the index. Okay. Let's also just, let's actually put this in a div so that we can, actually, instead of a div, let's use some fragments. So we can put a remove button. So let's say button, remove user, and on click, I'm just going to do remove. So this is an anonymous function because we have to actually pass in some parameters to this. And the parameter is actually the index that we want to remove from our users array. So the index we want to remove is just this one, the current one that we're looping through. So just index. So that is how we map over all of our users. Next, I'm just going to do just a button here, add new user. So what this is going to do is on click, I'm just going to call push. Actually, I think I can call it by itself. I don't think. Oh no, actually we have to push. And then what we push is going to be placed inside of this object, this array here. So I'm just going to pass an object with name as just an empty string. So this is going to be pushed. You can think of this as the initial state for that part of the map. So now if we take a look at this, oh, and that's because the validation here is actually off. Let's comment this out for now. And let's comment this out. So let's Might as well just remove these since we're not going to be using them anymore. Let's add a new user. So this is index 0. Oh, and this probably needs a key. So let's do react.fragment key is equal to, let's just say index for now. So we add a new user. Let's also console log values just to see exactly what's happening. So initially values empty array, uses the empty array. When I add a new user, user actually has one value inside it, which is name. If I type test and I just go to the bottom here, you can see that name actually becomes test. Let's now add another user. So now we have a second user. We open this up, you can see that name is empty, so let's say test2. Let's open this one up, and you can see we have test2. Let's remove our first one, so the 0 index, and only keep test2. You can see we only have test2, and that's the new first index, and we look here, we only have test2. So this is how you deal with dynamic sort of inputs, so where you don't know exactly how many things you're going to need. This is a really nice feature that formik has added. Just want to clear one part of this. This name is quite important. And another thing, the validation for this can be a bit irritating. So here's how I do it. So if we do yup dot, I think this is array of, and then it's going to be array of yup dot object dot shape. And then, so it's an array, which it's an array of objects where the shape of the object just has a name, which is required, and oops, it's actually yup.string, and then let's just say required. And then let's say min, so this is the minimum users, so let's say minimum of 3 users. Actually, let's ignore that for now because I just realized this would throw a different type of error, which we currently don't handle. So let's leave it at that. Actually, let's see how this works out now. So if I create a user, I hit submit. Oh, we haven't actually synced it in, so let's connect it. So now if I add a user, you can see users 0 name is required, field is required. You might want to change the names of these, so I might do something like this field is required. So now it's like this, and then we can do something like test, and then the error message will go away. We add new user, test, and then so on. And just to show you guys the error I was talking about before, if I say min, let's say a minimum of 3, if I hit submit, we don't have any error message showing. If I do errors, and I console log errors, oh, and I should also do required. So submit, users field must be at least 3 items. And if I add new, hit submit. Oh, well, actually now it's just showing the individual ones. So if I write test here, and now I hit submit, user field must be at least 3 items. So you can see there's actually 2 different types of errors. So one of them here is a string, and here it's actually the same thing. Users is now an array. So what you might want to do is, let's say here, we can do errors dot users and errors and type of errors dot users is equal to string. Then we just want to show that error, so errors dot users. So now if I write test, you can see user field must have at least 3 items. So this is how you would do the validation for this. It's not as pretty, but it does work. So yeah, I know this is a fairly simple video. I didn't go too complex into anything. I know this is maybe a little bit complicated, So that's it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. I hope maybe you're considering using formik in your next project. I think this is a really powerful package, and I think it helps you guys out a lot. The fact that we can create things like this text input component here, which just connects to our formik wrapper component, is really nice. I think how it handles things like errors with yup is quite nice. You can also do your own error handling. I didn't show you guys in this video because I think yup's quite a lot more powerful in my opinion, although a lot of the time you would probably have to create your own error handling if it's a edge case. But yeah, that's it for this video, guys. If you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate a like. I regularly upload React videos, so if you're looking for more React videos, I have videos on things like React Query, Redux, React Router. So yeah, thanks for watching. Bye.